know what? If there is entitlement, it won't be around for long under my leadership.
Sit down and zip it up. Sit down and zip it up.
Is that Lake of Fire party over there, Mr. Speaker? Trying to zip one day, zag the other day.
Seems like the bigger Lake of Fire is over there.
This was a week, and I don't know what you think, Don, but I thought this was a week where I expected things to calm down, and instead it ramped up. Life after Redford seemed to exacerbate the emotions in the legislature and in the Alberta politic this week. And it felt like we were watching a bunch of fifth graders on RedBull just running around sort of attacking each other.
I would note that the former premier who just stepped down, she did the right thing and resigned. You shouldn't have stabbed her in the back.
I was surprised at the tenor. What about you, Don?
Yes, I was surprised too, but in retrospect, I don't think it's too shocking. There's a certain level of remorse among some of the PCs about what happened. It doesn't mean they don't think she had to go, but they're human beings and they know how tough the fall was for the premier. There's a feeling that Hancock hasn't quite got a grip on the caucus cabinet. The emotions in the legislature were just absolutely raw between the parties and even within the PC caucus. So this has not gone away, and maybe from their perspective, getting the leadership campaign launched and getting the focus out of the legislature and onto that will be the best thing for the government.
Hello. Thank you for coming. We're joined here with Ken Hughes, who has just announced that he's the first entrance into the PC leadership race in Alberta. Mr. Hughes, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So the PC party right now is down 20 points or so in the polls. They've got financial problems. They've just pushed out 2 leaders in a row. Why would anyone want this job?
Well, you know, if you only have up to go, then that's a good place to start.
So what's going to be your theme of your campaign?
Well, I'm talking with people about the importance of trust, the trust between a leader and the caucus, between the caucus and the leader, and also party members, and trust with Albertans. I think that's what my campaign will be built on, is rebuilding that trust.
How do you expect this race to be different maybe than the race that we saw 3 years ago?
You know what, I can't answer that question. I think every race has its own character. It depends on how many people decide that they're interested in coming into the campaign. I believe that this will be a really good, robust campaign.
Last question, and that is, you're the first out. Why did you decide to go, and why did you decide to leave cabinet and jump into the race so quickly when obviously there's other members of cabinet still kicking the tires?
Well, you know what, my decision was based entirely upon my own perspective. When I look at something like this, I determine whether or not it is appropriate for me, whether I can make a contribution or not. And once I have made my mind up, I want to go get at it. And I think that's just me. I know my colleagues will make their own decision in their own time, and for all the right reason. I'm very confident of that. The right reason and the right time for me was now.
Well, you know, what I really thought we were going to be watching this week was a return to government business. And I thought we did see a little bit of that, but in many ways it kind of became a push-pull week for me, for the government. They tried to push the agenda forward and move some issues out of the way. And I thought Premier Hancock did that very effectively in the first couple of days by tackling the issue of the Tories' so-called secret trust fund, where he told the party to wind it down, that there was no need for it not to be transparent. And I thought that was some good sort of political maneuvering by the Premier. But then we saw the Wild Rose manage to pull it back to the issues of sort of trust and accountability when they brought forth some FOIP documents showing $250 million of consulting contracts at AHS, and it just seemed like they got pulled back into that debate, which they don't want to be in.
Yeah, the Wild Rose did a good job there. They came up with all that incredible number, $250 million in 18 months spent on contracting and contracts in AHS. But then the whole thing went totally off the rails with a seemingly innocuous motion from Kent Hare, the Liberal, Motion 503, which basically called on school boards, or said the government should call on school boards to allow gay-straight alliances in schools. And this one was, from a political perspective, from the Liberals' point of view, was brilliant, because the NDP, the Liberals all voted for it. They totally put the Wild Rose back into Lake of Fire country, because they all voted against it, and the PCs were split. So it turned into an incredibly emotional, the most emotional insulting, obnoxious day I've ever seen in the legislature was the day that the government was getting questioned on this on Wednesday. And they know that this, from all of them, ended up looking bad, but really, I think probably it hurt Wild Rose the most.
Will the Energy Minister confirm today that she is not in the race to become Premier, or will she resign to prevent the appearance of campaigning on taxpayer dollars?
The decision by Jim Prentice on whether he's going to run or not, which is still a live decision, they're still considering it, could very well come in this week, and it'll be a very interesting one, because it may well make decisions for some of the others on whether or not they're going to run. Clearly Kent Hughes is in, he said he is, and he's not leaving, but some others may drop out if Jim Prentice comes in.
Chris? Yeah, I agree. I think the leadership sort of specter looms over everything. I think even in the House, we've already seen the opposition start to attack the Tory ministers one by one. Mm-hmm. Those who are considering running, why don't you step down like Ken Hughes did? Don't be campaigning on the government tab. And I think they're going to go back to that focus. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how some of the cabinet ministers handle those questions. We already saw, though, Ken Hughes sort of set the precedent, and now it puts the focus on all of them.
Well, the Premier, the ex-Premier, is showing herself as an MLA for Calgary Elbow. She's been very busy in the last few days. She's been making a lot of kind of personal connections with people and friends, and trying to rebuild it with some dignity. And I'd say she's probably achieved that by making a couple of appearances. But I'm sure things are they must be very raw still. So no, we're not getting interviews at this point.
Honourable member for Airdrie. Honourable member from Airdrie. Airdrie!
The ever-popular winners and losers. Chris, who's your big winner this week?
My winner this week is Kent Hare. I thought the Liberal MLA for Calgary did a masterful job of introducing an important public policy, which has to do with the gay-straight alliances and whether schools should have to accept them or not if the students want them. So he obviously felt that this was an issue that needed debate, and it got brought up. But I thought politically it was a masterstroke as well, because as you pointed out, it painted the Wild Rose into a corner, which brings back sort of the whole lake of fire issues, which the Tories brought up as well in the House. But then it also showed the divisions within the Progressive Conservative caucus. You had the Education Minister arguing against the motion, and then you had Dave Hancock, the Premier, who wasn't in the House, say a day later he would have actually supported the bill. So the Conservatives look like they're divided. The Wild Rose got painted on the defensive, and Kent Hare managed to frame the debate.
Who's your winner, Don?
My winner for the week would be Ken Hughes. He's done this in an unusual way, getting out in front, resigning cabinet right away. But this is a race without an obvious front runner. Last time Gary Marr was the front runner, and sometimes you don't want to be there. Ken Hughes is not in that position, but he's got himself a couple of laps out in front of all the other ones for whenever they start. I mean, this guy is probably, if the other ones really wait until after the budget debate's over, and even until after the session's over, Ken Hughes is going to have lapped the province about 5 times, because this guy is going to have a very active campaign going on. So they're heavily critical of him privately, some of the other candidates, saying he's done himself in, it's not a good thing to leave the budget debate. The public doesn't care about that, I don't think, very much. I'd say he's the guy who's won the week. I would put as my loser of the week, I would say Wild Rose for what happened over the very bill you just mentioned, motion 503, which, despite all of their efforts and genuine efforts to bring in moderate policies on human rights and all that, they all end up looking like anti-gay. It looks like, from a perspective of a lot of people in the big cities, which is the area they need to crack to win anything, it makes them look like they haven't changed. I'm not sure that's true, but that's the way it looks.
Well, my loser of the week is the guy who lost control of the legislature, Speaker Gene Zwodeski. Gene is a very affable guy, I think most people would agree, but it seemed like he was losing his temper a lot. It seemed like he couldn't keep control of the MLAs. We had at one point Raj Sherman accused the Tories of being homophobes. We saw the Premier fire back, I think, a line about them being, disgusting behavior. We heard people tell Raj that he was a joke. We saw, I think, Manmeet Bhullar accuse the Wild Rose of being the lake of fire party. It just seemed like there was a short fuse, and at one time the Speaker had to get up and literally tell Rob Anderson to zip it. I don't know if we've seen that in the legislature often before, Don.
No, and actually yelling. I haven't seen a Speaker have to yell to get another member to stop yelling. Normally, the way it works is when the Speaker stands, everybody else is supposed to sit down, period. So I would say that he's pretty close to losing it, that's for sure.